Hey, we're keeping well. I am with former Leinster rugby player, Irish under 20 international Charlie Rock. Cheers for jumping on.
No problem, Brian. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Cheers. So, chat to me about what you're up to now with My Club 360.
Yeah, so currently I'm the CIO of My Club 360. Essentially, it's a software that's designed to optimize sports clubs' performance. So essentially, we kind of handle everything on the back end to make kind of club admin very seamless. So everything from kind of managing member subscriptions, being able to sort kind of fixtures, player communication, and then the most important part, which is kind of the community, the kind of online community development of it. And then so that's kind of one side, which is kind of the member management, and then on the other side, we've also built a kind of a new revenue driving system for sports clubs that goes beyond the traditional methods of sponsorship. So, kind of moving away from, trying to move away from just names on jerseys and rattling buckets in your local supermarket to being able to kind of drive more consistent revenue through our platform. So that's kind of, I suppose, the elevator pitch for My Club 360. We launched officially in March. It's been a long time coming. Worked with a team on it, kind of in the for the last kind of year and a half. I think the idea is kind of spurred mainly throughout COVID and kind of seeing the impact COVID had on different sports clubs around the world. So yeah, here we are, a couple of years down the line, and yeah, things are going well.
Cool, I'm sure. So, yeah, pretty busy startup. And are you remote?
Yeah, so I am remote. If I mean, yeah, I am. I am from London, but I'm kind of back to Ireland very frequently. So I'm kind of flying back to Dublin, kind of I'd say twice a month. At this stage, I think obviously the plans for us is to kind of grow into the UK and the US as quickly as possible. Kind of crack the Irish market and then go overseas. So it's a good base for me right now, particularly as the appetite among sports clubs in the UK continues to grow as well.
Cool, nice one. And so, as we were chatting, I saw your post last week on LinkedIn, which I thought was class. And I suppose the transition from playing to what you do now to working. But yeah, just looking at here, the first line you were saying, it's been 5 years since I made the challenging decision to walk away from the one thing I believed I excelled at. And yeah, chat to me like, how was that? Because yeah, like you played with Leinster and Irish 20s and all that, and like you did excel at it.
Yeah, I think I think it was my own. I guess it was my own social kind of identity capital, I'd call it, that I'd built up for myself from the age of 13 when I first started playing. Realized I was quite good at it, and then you go through the ages. You go through your junior cup and then kind of senior cup. Played in fourth year, fifth year, and sixth year, so I was exposed to that kind of really early on. Obviously, I went to Blackrock, which was a massive rugby school. So yeah, that kind of forged my identity. I knew I was very good at it, so I was able to kind of build, yeah, I suppose that identity for myself, and then carried that in to the academy, and then into the Leinster team, and then kind of with that, obviously, I played Irish, kind of 18s, 19s, 20s, all the way through. So I think walking away from that was difficult because that's all I felt I had ever known, and it's all anyone thought that I could bring to the table. So it was kind of one of those things where you're kind of walking away from this massive mountain, well, not massive mountain, but you're walking away from this stockpile of things you've tried to build for so long to then suddenly just walk out the door and kind of feel like you've got nothing behind you from kind of what you've built. So that was that was a tricky decision to make.
And why did you?
I think I kind of fell out of love. I kind of fell out of love with the game. I think I'm pretty, for those who know me, pretty big on affirmation. And obviously in Ireland, there's only four teams. Obviously, I was part of Leinster, which is arguably considered the best team in Ireland. And so I kind of felt like no matter what I did or tried, I could never kind of get to the next level. And I think even I think I kind of grew to resent. I grew to kind of resent the game. I wasn't enjoying that challenge, because I think when everyone sets about a challenge, they do their utmost to try and achieve their goal. And then when you can't break through, that kind of tends to kind of revert inward, and you start asking yourself the questions why. I think my mental health probably took a bit of a toll by the end of it as well. And I kind of realized when that started to happen, I thought like I kind of needed to take a step back and kind of reevaluate if this is the path that I wanted to go down. So it was a culmination of things really, that kind of made me decide to part ways.
Yeah. So I hear you. So like you're trying to crack it, so to speak, and then when it kind of wasn't happening, you didn't feel like going elsewhere, or because like once you've played with Leinster, like you can go other places and get paid to play rugby.
Yeah, and I always thought that. I think, I for some reason I kind of always felt like I was, I wouldn't say second choice, but I was an afterthought, even in that kind of system. I was the only one in my academy dressing room without an agent, and for someone that kind of had a lot of their value attached to affirmation or through voted confidence, whether it be from a coach or someone else. That was also something that was ringing in my mind. It was like, why, not even an agent thinks I'm good enough to be able to partner with. And that's just transparently, those were things that I definitely went a little bit inward on. Um, and I think I kind of waited up. I did have opportunities to go elsewhere. Those conversations did happen, but I think I just had this kind of burning feeling inside me that I had more to offer outside the pitch than I did on it, despite all of that capital that I'd kind of built up for myself. And then I think I knew with some of those thoughts and my mental health maybe not being in the best shape at that time, kind of just using that as the kind of time to be like, right, okay, we've got to do something here. And that was, I suppose, that just made it a little bit easier, kind of having a clean chop. I don't know where I would have been if I tried to make that work, when it was kind of felt like everything inside me, it was kind of telling me to stop. So yeah, so I guess that's probably why.
Yeah, yeah, and I know exactly what you mean with like tying up your identity in it, and like social capital and all the things you're saying, and then your the mental health side of it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're getting at. What was like? How did you feel then towards the end? Like what was going on?
So I think like when everything that you do, you obviously you serve. At that, like being a professional rugby player, people, it sounds very glamorous, but you actually serve. You're serving the team, and serving that, or the teams that you are a part of, like both in AIL and Leinster Rugby. Even so, your working week, but then it's also the weekends, which I think some people don't really kind of think about. Like there's really no, where it felt like there's no real off switch. And so I think that, coupled with just, it's kind of like an internal, the internal thoughts just start eating away at you as to why you're not good enough when it's been your whole life. So like, why can't you not get to the next step? Why doesn't anyone want to give you a chance? Even after what I would have thought were brilliant games, it's you're still not getting to that level. And then you go into that area of comparison, so you start comparing yourself to other people on certain elements that maybe they're better at than you. And then I think it's just a bit of a downward spiral really from there. So yeah, I think it kind of, where I was by the end of that was someone that just really didn't like myself when I was playing rugby. Like I like really wasn't comfortable in my own head when I was playing rugby. There were certain times on the pitch, like in that last season, and it's something that I've obviously reflected on now. But won an AIL with Lansdowne in my last season, which is an awesome achievement. But my head was so far gone that like I kicked the ball out, like to win. Like we were down at half time. I came on and kind of changed the game, and we came back and won it. And I kicked the ball out, and I didn't have 1 ounce of care within me. There was people jumping all over me, and I kind of just shrugged. And that's where my head was at after winning an AIL, which is actually, on reflection, it's disrespectful to all the people that wanted to win that medal. But I think it's just for me at the time. I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I was just thinking about, this is meant to be a peak, and that I I couldn't care about what this is. Obviously, a coach and mentor then kind of picked me up on it the following week, and I just said, look, my head's gone here. I'm not in the right mental space to continue to play. So I suppose, yeah, sorry, to go back to your question, I think that's kind of where I was at. Finishing on arguably a peak felt like a trough when it shouldn't have.
Yeah, yeah. And when was it like? So playing in school, Irish 18s, 19s. Did you love it all the way along there?
Yeah, I loved. I think school. I think was definitely the pinnacle for me because I think it was the only environment where I kind of knew I was trusted and that I was considered, one of the better players. So I was trusted with making the right decisions. I was always, picked. Like I got picked in fourth year, which in Blackrock was obviously a pretty big deal at the time. And then came all the way through. So I was picked. There it was like getting picked and having that vote of confidence that you can make the right decisions and make the right plays. And then I think as soon as I stepped out of that, the doubts I think from wider coaches started to creep in around me, which just didn't do my game any favors because I knew I was someone that to get the best out of you kind of needed to make sure that you were always backing up and gassing up. So even like struggling, like I struggled through. I mean, 18s was fine because it was just after school. Um, but kind of when I got to 19s, I was brought into camp late. 20s in my year, I wasn't even considered for the Six Nations squad. It was only because I think there was a try I think I scored in the AIL for Belvo for against Terranure, which was just one of these better ones, which was on Against the Head. I don't know if you remember that show,
Mm.
but it was aired, and I'm looking at that being like, well, yeah, that's just kind of what I do. But I kind of felt like everyone was blown, and then I get a call the next day being like, I saw that try, and then I get brought into the camp, and that's after the Six Nations. So then I go on to a trial again for the Irish 20s World Cup, and then ended up jumping two people ahead of me to get onto that plane. So I always felt when I left school that I couldn't understand why I had so much to prove when my rugby should have been doing the talking. Um, so I think that's kind of where I think from the outset the doubt then started to creep in from going to from winning a cup in Rock as a captain to having all that experience to then not really figuring out why I needed to prove people wrong. Yeah, that was basically it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and yeah, like not getting that environment and trust and like someone believing in you and valuing you is so so important. Like it's borderline
Mm,
impossible to play if you don't have that. And I was on the edges of Ireland teams, so like below you. Like I remember, yeah, like going into a school's camp and I was there to the last cut, but just feel like an outsider. And it's like, yeah, just having to prove yourself. And versus when you're in a team where the coach like just likes you and even and likes you as a person and gives you, like you say, that trust to express yourself. And
mm.
that's probably the kind of player that you are as well. Like when you have that and
Yeah,
you can express yourself.
yeah, for sure. And like I'm a scrum half. I was always smaller than everybody else. Yeah, even when I did play professionally, like I was, I was still a good 10 kilos lighter than the other nines that were in there. So like I always knew that I needed to have confidence. I needed to have chat because I kind of used to let the skills pay the bills. I think is what I used to tell myself, and so I needed that confidence. If I lost that, then I would have had what I deemed, nothing really in the artillery, or at least my main weapon of playmaking and being confident and doing that kind of thing. And I think when that just slowly starts chipping away, you start to ask yourself what value you're bringing to the table. And then I think when that happens over time, it compounds, and then you kind of, I suppose, end up maybe where I was.
Yeah, what do you think coaches could have done differently, say, when you were 19, 20, 21 at that time? What could coaches have done differently which would have helped you just, have a different path, we'll say, or things be different?
Yeah, like I'm definitely not going to put it all on coaches. Like I couldn't sit here in a camp and just being like, oh, you didn't pick me, so that's why I threw the toys out of the pram and stopped playing. There was definitely stuff that I needed to be able to improve on. Like intrinsically, I needed to be able to say, you look at some of the best sports people in the world, and they go out, they have literally become great athletes because their mindset was about proving people wrong. um, and you've seen that throughout the history of time. Unfortunately, I didn't have the intrinsic mental power to be able to do that, and I can reflect in there and say that I didn't. So I wouldn't say that it was the coaches specifically not picking me, but I think when I don't think if it was one coach or the other. I think for there was coaches that definitely got the best out of me, and those were the coaches that were able to g me up and allow me to make decisions. And I think for me it was just I never felt that I got. I don't want to say that I never got given an opportunity because I did, but I always felt that it was, regardless if I had a great game or a shit game, I'd probably still wouldn't be leaping the next guy because that position had already been predetermined. Um, and that's just how I felt, despite the games that I played. So I definitely wouldn't say that it was on the coaches to be able to change, their approach with me. I think it was probably a mixture of environment. What was Leinster the right team for me? I don't know. Like I could have gone to a different province, and then I would have been given more flexibility or more rain. Who knows? It's just one of those things. But I definitely don't look at it in a sense of you know not getting picked or blaming a coach for not being able to g me up the right way. I think the onus is on me as well as whoever is calling the shots and managing the players to be able to bring the best out of the team.
Yeah, for sure. And when you mentioned like your mental health towards the end of it there, and that's like 100%, it must be so common as well for players like getting dropped and being on the edge and not uncertainty, and because it's your whole life as well then. Like how was that, or was there any support with that, or?
Yeah, there was like I think the uncertainty part is the hardest part. Because I think in the like when you're coming through, you're doing so much. Like you're playing that full senior schedule in Leinster, but you're also playing for the AIL. So your output is actually greater. And I'm actually happy to sit here on reflection now and look at some of the lads who are playing in the first 15. You do more as an academy player because you have to sub in for Irish camps. You have to play a full week. Even if you've played 80 minutes on the weekend, you have to still show up on the Monday and train the full day. So you do more. From so I think that was taking its toll because I felt like I would never, you were never getting the kind of adequate space to even be able to process the thoughts that might have been creeping in. There was a lot of support from my RUPA. They did a great job. I was able to speak to the officer in there, the player development officer, and it was the first time that because I guess things were moving at such a pace that I didn't even stop to think that something might have been wrong with my mental health because it never had been a thing that I was just waking up every day, training and going to sleep and doing it again and not clocking. It was only the moments that would have been highly, I'd say, dramatic outside of that. That friends and family or family at least would have been like, "Geez, are you okay?" Because it would have been things just would have just changed on a dime, um, which is probably not normal for the average person. So I think there was definitely support there, but it was only when I acknowledged that things actually weren't too healthy upstairs, that I kind of went and sorted out towards the end.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
how was that process of getting better?
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's like it was the like the best thing that I've ever been introduced to was is therapy. To be honest, like I think obviously that stigma for a long time, and you're a lot of that came after, like I talked about in the beginning, about building up that identity, and then when you lose all that, it's like, well, okay, then, and it's very cliche, but then it's kind of like, who are you? Like, what do you have? And so, I think like discovering that towards the end of my career, I think the proudest thing I was able to do was acknowledge that I wasn't doing too well mentally. I think mentally, in the case of just being like just a little bit all over the shop. And then I think, like, I'm proud of myself to have the recognition to walk away from the thing that I knew was triggering that the most. Because I think most people would stay in what they're doing and say, well, I need to do this despite, like, my mental health will suffer because it's a job. So I think, yeah, that on the one hand. And then after that, being put in touch with, therapists, from the help of Irupa and things after that. When I moved to Australia, I started to see a therapist a lot more regularly, and it just really helped me kind of, for the first time I felt in my life, actually sit there and process what was going on in my head instead of just waking up, training, trying to get my degree, uncertain if I was going to get a contract, one foot in front of the next, day after day after day.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's so interesting. I started going to a therapist about 8 weeks ago, and I never did, but I kind of, like, when I finished playing, like you say, like my head was fried. Like I hit rock bottom, was just drinking loads, doing drugs. My shoulder was fucked. Like I couldn't, I had to stop with an injury, kind of like I couldn't move my arm, and I was just like, yeah, hit rock bottom. But yeah, anyway, started like learning about all this different stuff, mindfulness, meditation, all this kind of carry on. But yeah, then even just, yeah, like a couple of months ago, I was like, oh, things are better than they've ever been. But as think, they could be even better. And hearing different people speak about therapy, and I was like, there's probably just one or two little areas of what, a couple of areas I'm not 100% with, and it's incredible. Yeah, it's so helpful to sit there and, like you say, just talk and just unwind things.
No, no, for sure. And definitely, that having those conversations when I was a player probably wasn't encouraged enough, because the narrative was, if you're struggling, go to somebody and then speak about it, not before it has to get to that stage of being bad to then speak to somebody. Like, I don't think you need to have a problem, even inwardly, before going. It just actually helps you, like you said, you know, articulate what's going on inside your head and how you're approaching certain situations mentally. Even if you would consider yourself in good mental health. So I definitely agree with you there. It's been life changing for me, really, and something that I owe a lot to be able to have figured out the new path that I've been able to go on. I think since I stopped playing.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. It's something that you don't need to hit rock bottom to then get help, and that's, yeah, exactly. Like I said, I was couldn't had never been better, but I was just like, I want to be even better, and it's such good investment in yourself as well, I think.
Massively, massively, and I would encourage anyone. I mean, anyone who listens to this, I think it's. I mean, particularly with men, I guess it's always it is always something that's brought up. Like, I'm pretty passionate about. You don't need a reason to go to therapy. I think even just being able to listen and articulate your thoughts out loud will put you in a better, more reflective spot to make better decisions going forward. If only someone had told me that while I was playing, then I would be able to, instead of bring just vehement aggression to the family dinner table, reflecting on my week, I'd be able to actually talk about it in more of a reflective and objective manner, I think, than what I did. So that's definitely something that I would uh, have changed, I think, if anything, where I would have liked to know.
Yeah, 100%. I know what you mean, the aggression, and then just look, the gym is great and all that, and going for runs, and I still go to the gym all the time. But
Mm.
yeah, it's not the only way, And
Yeah, yeah. There's more. There's more than just the traditional outlets that I think people are aware of. I think.
yeah. And how did you find it then? Like, say, the year two, three after, when you were coming, like, I suppose, coming to terms with it a bit, or Because obviously when you're growing up, it's all you want to do, and you get very close. And yeah, how was that?
Yeah, I wanted to run as far away from that identity as possible. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I went through this, probably this kind of version of a breakup, like you would with a girl. Like, I deleted any sort of social media photos that I had playing. I really wanted to shed that from me because I was pretty bullish in my approach. That, I was, and it, like, not me moving to Australia to be like, I need to leave, I need to get out of here. There could have been a bit of that, definitely, but I just didn't want any new people to that I met to rely on the fact that I had this behind me to have a view on who I was, because I was so unsure in my own identity that I almost wanted to clean the slate and be like, right, you don't know me, you don't know anything about me. I didn't play for Leinster. Who am I? And to be able to build, work colleagues, new friendships with people who didn't, give a fuck whether or not I was a rugby player or not. That was important for me. And so yeah, honestly, Brian, like, I ran so far away from that old life. I didn't play any rugby union in Australia. I played a bit of touch footy, which was nice because, you get thrown in from a group of mates that kind of didn't really know what your skill set was, and then you jump in and everyone's like, wait, hang on, like, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. And so it's nice to be able to remind yourself in those moments of, like, I actually was pretty good at that. I'm so much happier where I was. I think the big change for me was just, it was like this weight that had been lifted off my shoulders in the years that I stopped, because I didn't have this pressure to live up to, being this kind of player, I guess, and being always on, and, sleep at this time and waking up and super disciplined. So I definitely became much more relaxed in myself, I would say.
Yeah, something interesting you say there, and I've just been kind of thinking about it myself, or maybe going through it, or I know exactly what you mean as well, of getting rid of the identity and not wanting to be that. And I was the same. I was well, I went to America for rugby, but then I was in Vancouver, and yeah, just didn't want to have that. But I kind of nearly feel I blocked it out so much at times, and then only in recent times, very recently, would look back and go, "Oh, I actually was good," or I would have even found it difficult for me to say that or to even think that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that was negative, and it's even, yeah, just something I'm thinking of now. Like, no, like, to look back somewhat fondly.
Yeah, that resonates so much. That resonates so much, because if you think about it, how small that, I suppose, that elite talent pool is in Ireland. It's probably the top, 1 or 2%. But I think, like, it resonates a lot because you forget that, that you actually were good until you start playing with, quote unquote, the average Joes, and you're like, well, actually, I can do things that they can't do, because I forgot that I was in that top 1 or 2%. And so those little reminders were great, or are great, for anyone who's stopped playing. But I think I kind of look back on those things kind of fond. When I was playing, I'm like, that's nice to know that I still have some of those skills, but also to kind of smile and go, I'm a lot happier being able to chuck the ball around with some friends now. Knowing all the other stuff in my life has calmed down and I'm a lot more relaxed. Um, but you're right, it is something that, you have those rare moments where you can reflect and actually appreciate the skills, because there was a time, for a long time, where I just thought I was garbage, really, uh, based on, because I wasn't getting picked, because I just didn't intrinsically have that strength, um, to be able to convince myself and look at myself in the mirror and say that I was good playing with the rest of them.
Yeah, it's shocking. I had the exact same. That would have been like, I'm useless, or I was useless. I
Mm,
wasn't good. I wasn't good. And then
mm,
people, like, it's wild. Even then, when I just went back playing in Vancouver, and I was going to play with Camden, so I was like, oh no, I wasn't good. And I don't know. It's just mad. It's, you find it very difficult to give yourself praise, or I don't know what it is,
mm.
but like, to sit there and even just be like, yeah, I'm a good player. I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I think it's definitely some sort of element of, I wouldn't call it perfectionism, but I think it's probably, what we would have deemed not getting to that next step is is probably considered a failure. So like I look at that and go like probably I did I fail at becoming a pro rugby player? Probably. And so I think it's natural. It's only natural, I think, like to divert to that stance of like just I wasn't great, because it kind of protects yourself from that narrative. Well, actually, maybe you were pretty good, but you just don't want to go back and open that door, open that door again. So that's certainly how I probably would have felt about it. Like I wasn't the best of the best, so therefore I wasn't good at all.
Mm. Yeah, then but when you look at it objectively, it's like it's the point. It's probably the 0.1% if you think of everyone who plays
Yeah,
rugby.
yeah, no, for sure, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I think it's so hard for you to get yourself into that mindset. And again, stepping away from rugby, had I been able to, reflect in that mindset, like you said in the beginning, there could have been a whole host of other options that I could have taken maybe to continue playing and to get that confidence back. Um, but I definitely wasn't equipped well enough at the time. I think at that time. So it's definitely not something I look back on with regret. I guess it's just the way it goes and how the paths carve out.
Yeah, it's sometimes right. I found when I was in my kind of late 20, I don't know, 26, 27, 28, and I started realizing all this stuff, and I was like, geez, if I knew this when I was 18, 19, it was like, wow, everything would have been different. And you kind of get a bit annoyed, but then I just like, no, I can't have, just is what it is.
Yeah, hindsight is it'll always do that to you. I think, won't it? I think that's why. That's why
Yeah.
it's
And
called
how
that.
was
I
living in
think.
Australia?
Yeah.
What was what was it like going to Australia then getting out of the, I suppose, fishbowl?
It was amazing. It was by far the best decision I've ever made. I think because, as you described, it is quite literally a fishbowl. In Dublin, South Dublin rugby, South Dublin in the sense of playing within Leinster and having most of the teams, even in the AIL, the year I was there, kind of winning and stuff like that. It was amazing to feel. It was amazing to feel that I'd kind of fallen off the face of the earth for a while without it getting too dark. It was nice to kind of just go into kind of complete anonymity, I guess, in that respect. No one really knows who you are. I didn't really know too many people out there, so I had to kind of. It was very much like I threw myself off the deep end. It's like go and make friends, but you're not allowed to make friends without a rugby ball in your hand. And like even if as a kid, that's looking at the Leinster games at age 8, used to go out to the back of Donnybrook and play tip, and that's how you'd make mates. So that was actually the first time where I had to try and figure out who I was, what I liked, and what kind of person I was, and what kind of person I wanted to attract in my life without this rugby, with this rugby backing again, this capital that I had built. So that was amazing. And then I think being so far away from that old reality helped me take the space to be able to reflect on what life was like, I guess, in that fishbowl, which I think it kind of, when you gain perspective, you gain a kind of a sense of objectivity that you're able to kind of view things with, a little bit more clarity. So taking that space was amazing. I love Australia. It's very suited. I was in Sydney. It's very suited to myself, my personality, my lifestyle, like the kind of person the kind of environment that I think I would really enjoy. So it was the perfect kind of next step for me. Didn't come without its challenges naturally, but all of those new things like finding a house, trying to look for a real job, like all of that kind of stuff. But that was just amazing for. It's exactly what I needed, I think, to kick myself into the real world.
And yeah, it's interesting there you say like meeting people outside of rugby and having never done that and know exactly what you mean. It's and then kind of like finding your identity or like who am I?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, like a fishbowl is like a again like from being in Blackrock and then all the way through. Like rugby was pretty much most of my friends. All the way through. It was all who I was. It was what I connected with people with, even in social occasions. I'd go to rugby matches. So yeah, I think yeah, it was and to be able to do that in Sydney. So there was games that I used to go to, but I used to like going to them because nobody knew that I used to play rugby. So like I kind of like it was nice because you kind of there's no, I don't know, there's no comparison. I think like I wasn't watching the game being like, oh, that scrum half's just thrown two passes on the floor. I couldn't give a shit now. I was like watching it being like, oh damn, it's actually a really good game. And that's the difference, like for me, on reflecting on that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Do you watch it now?
Yeah, I love it. Like things have come full circle. I think I'll always be a fan. Yeah, I think I just needed the space to be able to enjoy and appreciate the game again. It was a love that became a job that became too deep of a black spot in my mental state, and then being able to rewind, reflect. I still have a lot of close friends that are playing. I couldn't be prouder of them to have been able to get to the top levels because I know the challenges that are involved to get there. So again, maybe there was an element of jealousy or why comparisons, like why haven't I at that level? I'm very proud to be their friend now because I know what they've had to endure and the sacrifices that they've had to make to get to that level. So when I watch them, it's almost like unlocking a whole new level of pride because of what they've been able to achieve. So I love it. Again, it's something that bonds myself and my old man. I think it always will. And so I enjoy it just as much as the next rugby fan. I like having a Guinness in my hand and not be puking in the changing room before. It's probably the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Puking after the watching the match and the few Guinness instead of before the game.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather that. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you get that before games? That anxiousness.
Yeah, yeah, like I was naturally an anxious person. I think that's what drove some of the darker thoughts. Like I think, I was highly anxious. I was perfectionistic. I mean, again, these are things I can reflect on now after having conversations in therapy. I know exactly who I was, what I am. Um, you know, highly anxious, perfectionistic, um, not comfortable in uncertainty whatsoever. So and things have evolved now. I would still say that there's going to be things in life that are prevalent than others. I've done a lot of work at trying to be better in those situations. But yeah, definitely before the game, I was like couldn't eat. Would just try and stuff myself the day before because I just couldn't eat anything on the day of a game, and just would overthink everything to the point where sometimes it would freeze me out in the big occasions. So yeah, unfortunately, that was the kind of. I mean, most of the time when you get on the pitch, those kind of things fade away. But there was a bit of a monkey mind, I would say, before the games kicked off.
Hmm. And what do you do nowadays to like just help you be your best self?
I think there's a few things. Like I know who I am when I'm at my happiest. And I think that's the fundamental thing because everyone's going to have ruts. I think everyone, there's going to be shit days, shit weeks. But I know exactly what my pillars are to be at my happiest, to be able to function. Um, so like now, for me, my main, I mean, they sound very cliche, but they just are. In terms of that, of the kind of pillars of I wouldn't say esteem, but just being able to just live happily. I think I need a good diet and I need to exercise every day. I think those are two things I know for myself that I need. If I'm doing those things, I'm two of you know a couple of pillars that are functioning, that I'm going to be a lot happier than others. And then I think sleep is the big one for me. So it's massively important for me. Like I can, so like you're like now, particularly in a startup, you can be working all these mad hours just because something happens or you think of something, you're like, shit, I need to change that. But I always prioritize my sleep now as much as possible. So a big thing for me that I've learned recently is I normally get up at 6 a.m. and then I like doing an early morning workout and going. But if I don't have enough sleep, I've worked very hard to not get into a space of a guilty consciousness for stopping the alarm and taking the extra hour to make sure that I'm functioning better. So before I would have been like, you're a lazy bollocks. It's your fault you didn't sleep well. Get up and go to the gym. Now I'm like, well, actually, I know that's not going to serve me. We'll just have to squeeze in the gym later. That's going to be a sacrifice that you're going to have to make. So those are things that I know for me uh, keeps me, I wouldn't, yeah, happy, or those are the pillars that surround me in a good mental frame.
Yeah, I'm the exact same. And it's cool then, isn't it? Understanding and learning like these things help me have good days.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, and when you have the clarity, I mean, again, when you when you put it back to Leinster, and I reflect, I was training every day, so I was exercising every day, I was eating very well, but I was grossly unhappy. So I'm like, now, like, how has that evolved? Because if someone's listening to this, they're like, well, you were doing all that in Leinster, so how is where's that change? I think the difference is, I know I'm doing it because it serves me, not because it serves somebody else. No, I'm not exercising for somebody else, or I'm not eating well for playing in a team. I'm doing it for myself, and it's instead of it becoming affirmation, coach chooses you. It's coming from intrinsically within me for myself, because I want to pick myself for my own team. And I think that's the shift. That's the kind of the balance shift there.
Yeah. And so you mean by affirmation in that like if you get picked, you're good. If you don't get picked, you're bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Self worth.
yeah, the self worth, I think, was is the main thing, because in rugby you rely on somebody's opinion of you, which would often dictate how your career goes most of the time. And now it obviously is coming into mental and stuff, but yeah, I think for me it was trying to develop the kind of intrinsic resistance of, actually, do you know what, you can go out and achieve this, and you can do this for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something 100%. I know exactly what you're saying. That was me too. When rugby was going well, I was, so good within myself. But like I remember even not making that Irish under 18 team, just being down the dumps for 2 months, and just being like,
Mm,
I'm useless, worthless, may as well quit, all this kind of stuff. And what I've learned now is that you have to detach from everything, from all success. So you can't get high on any success. And I have to just bring awareness to that, because if you get high on the success, it's going to drag you down when ultimately, of course, things don't work out and you fail, because that's part of life. And whatever you do, it's just something you do. Like whether it be playing rugby, whether if you're, I don't know, working a job, whether you're doing something creatively, it's just something you do. It's not who you are. And you just express yourself, and then whatever, you have to let go of the outcomes.
mm. No, for sure, and I think that helps with, definitely, from like what you said there, it definitely helps with regards to that uncertainty. So obviously you didn't get picked at that time, so probably a lot of that for you was probably being uncertain, again, being great at rugby but not getting picked for the thing that you thought you should be. Where does that leave you mentally, and kind of, how uncertain are you going to be within yourself then? I think the best bit of advice that kind of helped me shift the mental dial, or to be able to g myself up internally, was actually looking at, any time something shit happens, or there's you don't get the rub of the green, or something is challenging in front of you. It's kind of like knowing you'll be a better man after the challenge, more so than having that like victory in that sense. So I am where I am now because I've had to go through all of that shit, and I'm glad I had to be able to do that, because I can sit here and be able to reflect on it. So I think now my approach is, when those things come, it's like, actually, do you know what, like, let's have you, because I know tomorrow I'm going to wake up a better. I'm going to be a better lad because of it. Because whatever is going to be, you're going to test me today, and I'm going to be stronger for it tomorrow. And that little shift even helped me grow my intrinsic mindset massively. So it went from a stage of being like, oh, I'm not picked, or this sucks, why is it happening to me, to, actually, do you know what, this is actually better because I have to go through this when the guy above me doesn't, uh, which is ultimately going to make me more resilient in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're saying there is like growth mindset is just kind of
Mm,
borderline the definition of growth mindset. And
mm,
I suss that too as well. And now, very similarly, when it's funny when shit's happening or when things aren't going well, I kind of try and bring awareness to it in the moment, and then I'm like, well, fuck, here we are. Jeez, this is shit. Gotta, this is the
Yeah.
challenge. I'm being challenged. Here we go. All right, fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, as you said, to be able to sit in that and just objectively call out the thought, like as you said, to say, actually, here we are, without reacting or without having, like coming at that with a very level-headed opinion by being like, well, this is a situation, instead of just diverting into one emotion. So it's cool that you've said that, because I think that's hugely beneficial to be able to just say, like, okay, here's the situation before, how do we want to react to this before just reacting to it blindly. So it's definitely, yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. That's a cool thing, or it's a great thing to be able to do when times get tough.
And what workouts do you do now when in the morning? What do you get up to?
So yeah, I'm running. I'm kind of on a running and lifting split. So I've been doing a couple of half marathons recently, which has been great. Trying to build myself up to a full one. I'm also on the bike. Well, trying to get back on the bike a little bit more. So I'm kind of at that phase now where I've kind of had 5 years of being able to do whatever the hell I want. And now I'm kind of like, I need to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and train for something, have a little bit more discipline. When there was once a time where I would have loved to have got away from as much discipline as possible, now it's coming back in the cycle again where I want to train it and achieve something. So I'm kind of in that spot now. So I've signed up to marathon. So I'll do Paris next year. One of my buddies is running all around Ireland, so I kind of hopefully we'll be able to join him and support him on some of his routes. So yeah, I think I've entered that mindset now where I'm like, yeah, let's go and challenge yourself and your mindset again to try and achieve something, because it's been a while.
Yeah, cool, cool. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It kind of you you kind of feel there's more. You go through, like you say, you go through a process of finding out what helps you be the best you, and then you're like, oh, there's more. I can get more here, and it's that we know it from playing rugby what it is. Like you
Mm.
know firsthand, it's black and white. There's no question. You know exactly what that feeling is, and then you're like, oh, let's go for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't think that kind of compared, like, I don't think we would have even been able to have played at the levels we played at without having that kind of gritty determination, willingness to want to win. So I don't think that's going to be the case for anyone that's played any sort of high level sport or sport in general. But I know something that's for me. It's probably like an additional pillar. It's like if something's not testing me, then I'll start to get frustrated and bored, and then you start to kind of go, oh, yeah, it's kind of like that purpose led element of driving your everyday. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, it's another part of self worth in that you need to be being challenged. I think you mentioned earlier comfort zone, and yeah, you need to be being challenged. Simple as like when everything's so easy and you're in that comfort zone, it feels nice, but you're just like I'm being far less than I could be.
No, 100%. I think we touched on growth mindset earlier. I think at times you have to acknowledge that being in a comfort zone is good. It's like there's a reason why there's checkpoints playing certain game consoles, right? Like you need to be able to have that checkpoint to just relax for a bit,
Mm,
because you've just come through level one, two, and three. So just park yourself on this hill. Like you look at any major accomplishment, there's always base camp. So it's like setting up those base camps and allowing yourself the comfort there, so long as you don't stay in base camp too long. So I think that's again something that I've kind of tried to approach in that way. It's like to always try and look towards the next challenge, kind of accept that you've come, the challenges you've got to, give yourself the break, and then go again. And I think if you do that, then you're just constantly challenge yourself to become a better person. So I don't think, and then I think like as you said, then that starts to build purpose, because you're getting up every day wanting to challenge yourself to achieve the best version of you.
yeah, no, 100% is a brilliant point you make. Absolutely, and it's yeah, you climb a mountain and you yeah take a moment and then set yourself up for the next mountain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what advice would you give, say, your younger self, maybe 19 years old, 20 years old, who was kind of moving towards that time from loving it to starting to not love it?
I think honestly, I think that life is bigger than there's more important things to life than rugby. And I think that because of the uncertainty, and I don't blame my 19-year-old self for being in that, because that was life for me. That's all I ever knew life to be. But when you get older, you start to appreciate the things around you. So I think having that appreciation or gratitude for your everyday kind of frees you, would have freed myself up a little bit to be like, actually, do you know what? It actually is okay if I threw a pass on the ground. I mean, Sexto might not have been happy in training, but it happened. I'm not dead. I'm healthy. I've got a loving family. And again, all this stuff people would hear sounds very cliche, but actually it puts you into a phase of perspective. So I think that's the kind of advice I would give to myself. I think is that there's bigger things than rugby. Almost, I would never have been able to do that, but if I was to drag myself up like above the universe and to be able to show you how big, like what that fishbowl looks like and all those other opportunities, that's another piece of advice that I would have been able to give, is that that there is life is bigger than rugby, and rugby is bigger than Leinster rugby.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and that then that's just come back to it, but that self worth, like you, it's very difficult to, if someone were to say to you like your rugby doesn't matter, it's not who you are. You know what I mean? Like at 19, back then,
Yeah,
if someone would say to me at that age, it I would don't think I'd be able to conceptually understand it. They'd need to be very good at explaining it, because that was all
yeah,
I was.
yeah. Or they'd need to drive a pretty good argument as to why everything else is more important. Like because I think even in that stage, you're like, oh well, obviously I've got my family and I've got all this kind of stuff. Obviously, I've always had that. You know, so there's those things. I think as you get older, you start to put into perspective about what levels of importance are what. And I think when you get out into the real world and you start working in a job that's outside of sport, you can sit back with the reflection that rugby actually is a job. And if somebody wasn't really liking their job at the time, most people leave and they go somewhere else. And so I think having that perspective is key. But again, we spoke about hindsight earlier, and I think if you're to live in hindsight, you're going to have a pretty bad time with it. So yeah, I think fundamentally, from an advice perspective, I think trying, or at least trying to be grateful for what you do have instead of always trying to compare what you don't. I think would be the best piece of advice I'd give to myself.
100% unreal. And gratitude is something that is just so powerful, isn't it?
Mm. Incredibly, yeah, incredibly so. I think it's obviously for anyone who listening who does meditation, if you've done it, or I've done, it's something that I'm kind of pretty consistent with at the moment. It obviously all centers around that. It's just such a way to change your perspective. Like it can change your mood in an instant, because you realize
Mm.
actually how lucky we are for the certain things that we have, against and again comparing yourself to others who wish they'd be like you. So it's that certainly helps me keep my feet in the ground.
Yeah. Do you meditate?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Again, I'd only really discovered it when things weren't going well. Again, that's something that I wish I kind of knew, or at least was had less of an ego to want to explore when I was maybe
Mm.
feeling at my best.
Mm.
um and so I think that's probably, yeah, I mean, I'll probably do 5 minutes minimum a day, and then on the weekends I'll try and get a little bit more in. Like maybe if it's like 15 minutes. Started massively when I was in Australia. I think being in that environment really helped. I suppose just being on the coast, where being in good weather, nature, like you're kind of forcing yourself. You've got way more time on your own, so you're like, how am I going to fill this time? And then since then, I've just made it a habit, and I don't think I'd be able to do life without it. Again, I think going back to pillars, I think if I dropped off that, I think again, you'd realize, that that's actually something that you need to keep up in order to stay on top of your feelings. So yeah, it's a big one for me. It's something that I'd find very important. I'm going to encourage anyone to try.
Yeah, two brilliant things there. 100% for me too. I don't think life would be nearly too difficult for me if I didn't meditate.
Mm,
Like it'd be it'd be so difficult. And like that, yeah, I do it every morning. Like I say, yeah, 5 to 15 minutes or whatever, whatever time I have, and then sometimes maybe throughout the day just pause for a moment. But also it's funny you said the ego, like when you're younger, when I was younger as well, like if some I heard of it, like that stupid shit, whatever, like
yeah,
because you're all about push, you're all, like you say, aggression, anger, like push push push, and the thought of stopping, slowing down, like I would have felt it was soft.
yeah. Well, I think that's the perception that everyone had, myself included, being like, who's this Yogi Bear doing that? Like, it definitely doesn't mean anything. But then you do the research and realize that it actually is. It's yeah, it's a lot deeper than that. And I think if it's in a case of you go to the gym every day for your physical, it's kind of like going to the gym 5 minutes a day for your mental. Your mental is the thing that's gonna always outlast your physical. The older you get, so I think that's the big thing. Again, you hear those certain phrases that come up that help shift your dial, but like they're right. Like you look at some of the older people, for example, like my granny's in her 90s. She's incredibly sharp up top, and obviously not as mobile as she once was, but incredibly sharp up top. Used to do you know 20 Sudokus a day with the crosswords, and that's just from like mind gym. Obviously, it's not
Mm.
meditation, but it's from actually working the mind. I was reading something recently with all the quick access to everything that we have. Obviously, our brains are becoming lazier because we're getting information quicker, and so that quickness of which we can get things, meditation slows all that down because it allows you to be more introspective about your thoughts. So you're actually training your brain, like as we spoke about. So I view that obviously in equal importance because it's the strongest muscle that you have really in your body. So I'm again with you there. I don't think I could. I don't think I could function very well if I didn't have it in my life.
Yeah, and so interesting to say that, yeah, about how we've everything at our fingertips. And yeah, something I've tried to do the last year or two is, when you get the urge to take out your phone like every 5 seconds, is to resist that urge. And that's probably stemmed from meditation, from me meditating. But like, yeah, resisting that urge and embracing boredom, essentially.
Mm. Yeah, no, I 100%. I think trying to find bliss in the mundane is, I think, the ultimate, the kind of happiness hack when you're kind of enjoying just the boredom. When you're like actually really happy with my own head and where I'm at. I'm definitely guilty. Like I did a lot of work, in a previous role on social media and digital media advertising. So I spent a lot of time on that. So that can be a habit for me to kind of always be on. But little things like charging my phone outside of my room or away from my bed even makes the slightest difference, which improves sleep, which then has a knock on effect. And so I definitely hear you there.
Yeah. And how do you think the World Cup will go?
I think really well. I mean, I went to Japan, so that was my first year after I stopped playing, and or a year, almost a full year after I'd stopped. Um, and that was amazing. Like that was the most amazing experience. I was at the Japan game when they lost, and that was insane. Like that was it was quality. I feel like this is different. Of like I'm quite I'm good friends with some of the guys. I was at a couple of their weddings the last couple of weeks, and the mood I think amongst the lads there, it's like there's like a quiet confidence, which I don't think we've seen before, and then just being able to back up a lot of results. I'm excited. I mean, the World Cup is amazing. I think this is probably the only World Cup where there's so many teams that can win it. Normally, you look at it, there's maybe two, maybe three. So yeah, I'm excited for the World Cup as a rugby fan, but I just love a good performance from Ireland. I think they will. I think this is kind of like the time now where if you look at all the junior, like the 20s guys who have been in finals, who have won 20s finals, like that dial has started to turn. So I kind of feel like that winning mentality is kind of ringing through the squad. I hope anyway. I definitely don't want to go too deep on it, but that's I hope. Yeah. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we potentially have New Zealand in a quarter final. Or who is it? New Zealand or someone else in a quarter? I
Mm,
I think it's New
trying to think
Zealand or
who's on
is it
our
New
side of
Zealand
the
or
draw.
France? New Zealand or France
New
in the
Zealand
quarter
and
final. That's
France.
who it
Yeah,
is. And so
France.
I kind of like for sure the last 2 years have just been like wow, like they're so impressive. Like they really are so impressive. How they do it, this Irish team. And but then I was like looking at that quarter final, what we've never got past that. Essentially a mental block it is in the Irish rugby psyche because we should have got past it many times, but we never do. And that's just going to be monumental that game. So I think we will win that quarter final.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think that quarter final is going to be the same as when we beat the ABs for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think it's like we do it once, and it's like, oh shit, we're on here now. Like we can definitely do it because as soon as we beat them once, like you've looked at what's happened against. I mean, we're what are we like 5-1 or something from like the last 6 meetings or something ridiculous. So it's like that little mindset. But I feel really good about this World Cup. That I think that's going to be the deciding factor where it's like not that there's a curse, but it's like we can do it and we can advance. And whether we win it or not, I think to just get that monkey off the back, I think sets ourselves up. I would absolutely love if we go to the final. I'll probably be out in the piss for a month after if we do. But even if we don't, even if we get to a final, or I think with the depth of the Irish squads coming through internationally, I think the next World Cup then it would rule out any day for me. I'd be like, I think this is it. So I do feel like whether we win it or not, I think this is the World Cup where we make a giant step in the history of Ireland in World Cups. Is kind of my prediction.
I like that.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
And yeah, we win. Win that quarter final, and not to be being too arrogant about the group. It's a very hard group, but um, if when we win that quarter final, then it can go two ways. It can go the way of was it England when they beat the All Blacks, and then that was their final,
Pinnacle.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
pinnacle, and then because the emotional energy it'll take, but then it can also, and I think this Irish team they're just different. Like they'll the way they just keep going, raising levels. That hopefully they win that, and then it's a catalyst to kick on and go even further and win it out
Yeah, I
in
think
Glasgow.
I like seeing all the comments online because I think everyone wants to see Ireland win, which is nice. Like it's nice to be in a team where people are like, actually, this is a team that I'd love to see come through and prevail. And so I kind of just feel with all the fibers in me that this could be it. But let's wait and see. It's like you said, it's a tricky side of the draw to come out of. But I'm excited for it. I think it's just such a good time to be a rugby fan this time. In the build up, seeing people coming in and out of squads, knowing the performances haven't even dipped. So I know we're playing England and stuff, and I mean, if you remember the last World Cup, we got hosed just before the World Cup, I think. So, but I still feel like it's different now. Like I feel like the mindset's different. So I'm excited for it, and yeah, hopefully the lads can do us proud out there.
Yeah, I was at that game in Twickenham when England beat us by
Okay,
50, and it was
50.
like
Yeah,
you say, it
yeah,
was kind of like, oh, we had been world number one, and then it was like, oh, oh,
yeah.
and it was kind of like,
It's like everybody knew. I think everybody knew. It was like, okay, we're not number one. We're definitely not number. So yeah.
yeah. Well, hey, Charles, thanks a mil for your time. Cheers for chatting. Been unreal.
No, thanks a million for having me. It's been a pleasure to catch up, and thanks for giving me I suppose the platform and space to be able to chat with you today.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Brent.